Thank you. Thanks very much, Jay, and thank you for inviting me to Kingwood. This is a real honor for me after having spoken in Karachi and Mumbai and Delhi and Damascus and Beirut and Istanbul and Ankara and other world capitals, now for the first time in Kingwood, Texas. So I feel I'm completing something here. And in reference was made to all of these awards I've gotten. It's kind of interesting. It really signals maybe a lifetime of work in doing alternative media, doing independent, progressive media. That's what alternative radio is about. I began in 1986 at a community radio station in Boulder, Colorado. That's where I started this project, and it's now on 250 stations all across the United States and Canada, Australia, South Africa, the United Kingdom, and other countries as well. But unfortunately, the situation is not so sanguine here in the Houston area because KPFT, your community radio station, the Pacifica flagship station in Texas, has taken alternative radio off its main channel and has shifted it to HD. Do you know what HD is? High definition radio. So you need a special radio in order to hear the program. The radio in your car won't get it. Your ordinary kitchen radio or bedroom radio won't work either. So I'm asking everyone here to write very simply to the station manager at KPFT. His name is Don, D-O-N, at kpft.org, and ask him to move alternative radio to the main channel. That will really help me a lot and also give you the opportunity to hear this weekly program where I present points of view on Venezuela, on socialism, on Social Security, on education, the attack on the environment. I was just driving through the area around the channel, and there was a microcosm of everything that's right and everything that's wrong with the US economy. The dependence on fossil fuels and the enormous profits it generates for a handful of corporations is sabotaging your future. This is about the young people in this audience who are going to face a planet that is increasingly inhospitable to you, and we are doing this. It's rather remarkable that the corporate media and the other media do not pay sufficient attention to this issue, or if they do, it's not with any sense of urgency. Oh, well, they'll figure something out. This'll change. It'll all work out. It won't work out unless there's a radical shift in consciousness. There has to be a paradigm shift in the way we think about energy. Think about, why aren't we using solar? Why aren't we using wind? I live in a state, Colorado, where we have 300 days of sunshine. You probably have an equal amount here in Texas. Where I live in Boulder, it's like a wind tunnel. So there's enormous amounts of energy out there that can be harnessed. But the dependence on fossil fuel is making the planet increasingly hot. The emission of CO2 into the atmosphere, I call it fossil foolishness. Why would a culture, why would a society continue to, go along this path of energy dependence on fossil fuels? It's all about money. It's all about profits. It's all about this, because this is how our politics are conducted in this country. You have money, you have a voice. You don't have money, see you later. And so getting away from this economic system is absolutely critical. And I'm really, it's shocking that there isn't a sense of urgency about this. I was just the other day looking at Rachel Carson's book. Some of you older people might remember it. It was called Silent Spring. It came out in 1962. She said, you know, she was a scientist. There's something happening in the atmosphere. There's something happening to the fact that we have fewer and fewer birds. And she connected that to the widespread use of DDT and other pesticides. The book she wrote, Silent Spring, is still relevant today. And if you read the dedication, she dedicated the book to Albert Schweitzer, who was a great medical doctor and humanitarian. And he said that humankind is destroying the earth, and that is the path it is on. And that was in 1962. There was a recent report from the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. That's a UN agency. They said by 2030, if this trend is not arrested to pumping more and more fossil fuels into the atmosphere, it'll basically be game over. Now, can you hear someone who is saying that we are in great danger? I mean, it's not a pleasant thing. You know, I'd rather be talking about James Harden and, you know, maybe he'll win the MVP unanimously this year. Maybe the Astros will go back to the World Series and win. Maybe J.J. Watt is the greatest defensive player of all time. You know, we've got lots of distractions out there, and that would comfort you. But I'm here to stimulate you, to provoke you into understanding what is going on with a system that is self-destructing. Now, before I continue on these happy notes, I want to hand out a sheet of paper, which I hope you'll sign up on, and that will mean I can connect with you in Boulder, Colorado, with alternative radio and the programming I'm doing. However, there is a caveat here. There are a couple of people here who may remember a course in high school called penmanship. No, maybe not. It was the art of writing clearly. I see one person nodding. Two people are nodding. So it was the art of writing clearly. The reason I make this sour joke is that when I get back to Boulder, I can't read 3/4 of the emails because people are just scribbling. And you don't have to worry about me sharing this with the FBI or the NSA because they already have all your material. So your confidentiality is secure. So if, Wally, if I could trouble you to hand that. So please write clearly, and then I'll keep you up to date on alternative radio. So this is the most critical issue of our time. I think saving the planet is a critical issue. Won't you agree? And the political culture is the way the capitalist system operates, you know, you have to give them some credit. Because, you know, they allow for recycling of plastic and cardboard and newspapers and composting things. And, you know, we all feel good. We ride our bikes or we drive fuel-efficient cars. These are all stopgap measures to seduce us into believing that climate change can be arrested. By the way, I saw Ralph Nader fairly recently, and when I used the term climate change, Ralph Nader, incidentally, is a crusader who has probably done more to save lives in this country and other country than any other American. We have seatbelts because of Ralph Nader. We have collapsible steering wheels because of Ralph Nader, and so many other safety features that he's responsible. But he chided me when I used this term, climate change. He said, don't say climate change, say climate disruption. Because that's what it is. Climate change is too pacific. It sounds, well, it's harmless. You know, I'm going to change the part in my hair. I'm going to change my shirt. I'm going to change my socks. You know about disruption. Can anyone say Harvey in this room? Did you see some disruption? Or was that just a normal occurrence? Well, you know, go with the flow. You know, it rained a little more than usual. This is a persistent pattern now over the last 15 or 20 years with the greater frequency of hurricanes, and in their duration is longer, and there are more and more of them. And we see this all across the globe. But the people at ExxonMobil, the people at Chevron saying, well, this is just the weather. This is episodic. These are one-offs. Yeah, it was a bad hurricane. There was some flooding in Houston, I know. Katrina was, you know, that was an exception. You know, New Orleans practically went under water, etc. But they ignore the evidence, they ignore study after study, report after report, which leaves no doubt. When you have 99.9% of scientists telling you that 2 and 2 is 4, are you going to say 2 and 2 is 5? So again, I am astonished at the lack of urgency around this issue, and the media contribute to this in their lackadaisical reporting and looking at climate disruption as examples of extreme weather, as one-offs, as things that just happen randomly. So to talk about the media and journalism, a profession, incidentally, that the Great Prevaricator calls the enemy of the American people. You are looking at the enemy of the American people according to the present occupant of the Oral Office. And you'll notice I use the word prevaricator. I always know there's 1 or 2 people in the audience who might not know what that word means. Is there 1 or 2 here, perhaps? And that gives me the opportunity to say it in plain English. Liar. The liar in chief. The tweeter in chief is, calling me and people in my profession as the enemy of the American people. This is right out of the playbook of Joseph Stalin. This is right out of the playbook of Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's propaganda minister. When they demonized the press as traitors. That's what we're being called for reporting the news, for talking about climate change, the crisis of capitalism, U.S. imperialism, U.S. militarism. When we bring up those topics, then we're the enemy of the people. So as long as we stick, to the Astros and Jose Altuve, maybe he'll win another batting championship, that's great. You're doing great journalism, cutting edge, you're really provocative, you're getting, dirt under your fingernails. But the really important things escape the reports that are coming out. So we have no less an authority than Thomas Jefferson. You know how elites love to quote the founding fathers as these venerable icons who were demigods. I call them the founding finaglers, incidentally. And if you want to understand how the country is run today in such a patently undemocratic way with the Electoral College and other mechanisms of political control, you can go back to James Madison, who is probably the most respected and senior of the founding finaglers. And you know what he said? He said, you know what the aim of the new U.S. government is? This is back in 1789. When they're writing about, forming the new country independent of England, he said the aim of government is to protect the opulent minority against the majority. Now, who are you? Who are we? Are we the opulent minority? Are we the 1% that controls capital, that controls wealth, that owns, oil tankers and, media conglomerates and vast corporations? Or are we the 99%? Well, I think it's self-evident. We are the minority in terms of wealth, that the aim of the government is to protect the opulent minority against the majority. It's right there. You cannot miss this quote from Madison. And that tells you a lot about political science, and maybe this is not taught in certain political science courses. I'm sure Jay Tice is an exception. But the origins of the problem go back to the beginning of the country, not just with slavery and genocide of the indigenous population, the stealing of land, the breaking of treaties. I mean, the whole host of the litany of crimes that were created and are still, in many respects, going on. Now, Jefferson, he said, an informed democracy will behave in a responsible fashion. So the question arises, what if the democracy is not well informed? What if the democracy is getting Mick news? What if the democracy knows more about keeping up with the Kardashians than they know who represents them in Congress or in the Senate? I spoke today at another campus, and I asked the question. It was kind of set up. who recognizes the names of James Harden, J.J. Watt, and Jose Altuve? Every hand went up. Then I said, who is your congressional representative? Not one hand went up. This is at the North Harris campus of this college. So I think that's very revealing, where citizens, students, who should be actively engaged with finding out about things and what's going on, because it's your future. I mean, I'm closer to the end than the beginning, but it's about the young people, and it's about arresting and stopping this slide toward not just quasi pseudo-fascism in this country, but to the very destruction of this precious blue planet. So I want you to be provoked. I want to say things to you that you won't leave here and say, well, that was really interesting. He had a lot of energy, kind of had a New York edge to him, and he was even funny, kind of, and then forget about it. No, that's not what it's about. That's not why I came here. That's not why I do this kind of work. Of course, I'm getting a $500,000 speaking fee. That's very, that will lure me, out of any situation I may have in Boulder. But that's not why I do this work. I want to see progressive change in this country, and it can happen if enough of you get engaged. If enough of you, get off of tweets and into the streets. Get off of Facebook and into the face of people with power. Get off the internet. Stop texting. Get involved. Find student groups or outside student groups like Black Lives Matter, like 350.org, and these other groups. Idle No More. There's a Native American group in Canada that's doing tremendous work about resisting pipelines. Native Americans ripped off in Canada just the way they were being and continue to be ripped off in this country as well. So the journalists, when we go to journalism school, and by the way, for the younger people here, I'm totally unqualified in doing this kind of work. I have no academic credentials. I would say the one blemish on my resume is that I went to San Francisco State College for 1 year. And then I dropped out because I found it so uninteresting and not to my taste. I just say that not to boast, but to do this kind of work, you need common sense. You need a sense of skepticism, not cynicism. You need to be asking why. Why are things the way they are? Why don't other students at a Kingwood campus know who their congressional representative is? The person that is making decisions affecting you and your family and your future. And people know more about Kim and Chloe and their latest, enhancement. I won't point to the body parts that they're, constantly engaging in. Knowing more about Brad Pitt's divorce, and maybe he'll get together with Angelina Jolie, Cyrus Miley and Katy Perry and all of the, stars that are out there. We're being smothered in a tsunami of celebrity-itis for which there is no known cure. And that's another way the political culture has atomized us and separated us so that, we live in front of these handheld devices. So I live in Boulder, as it was mentioned. I go into the coffee shops, and there was a time, not long ago, when people used to talk to one another. Now when you go in, all you see are the handheld devices or the iPads or the iMacs, and people are not communicating. They're locked in this electronic universe. Now, I don't want to completely denigrate the internet, but it's a lot like a hammer. It can do wonderful things like building a house, but it could also bludgeon someone to death. And I think we're spending way too much time on the internet, way too much time sharing articles and must read. I mean, I get 50 must reads a day. How could I could spend all of my time, reading these articles that friends of mine and acquaintances send me that I must read. This is in addition to the rest of the tsunami that comes down the pike. So there are 5 W's in journalism. If you go to journalism school or take classes, right? The who, the what, the where, and the when. The media do a mediocre and sometimes acceptable job in answering those 4 W's. But where they completely collapse is on the why. Why are things happening? Well, it's, the weather changes, people don't like us, Muslims are violent, Islam is a bloodthirsty religion, that's why we have problems in the Middle East. The Great Prevaricator said the Middle East, I'm quoting, it's a very troubled place. Well, by statistical error, he actually gets things right once in a while. But the question to ask is, why is it a troubled place? Is U.S. policy at all part of the problem? Are all our invasions and occupations and overthrowing governments and coups d'etats and sanctions, could that be contributing to people in certain parts of the world, in West Asia and the Middle East, to perhaps not liking the United States or the U.S. culture? That's where there is no answer. Because if you want to answer that question, why? You remember after 9/11, and some of you here are now 17, 18, 19 years old, you have been living in constant warfare. There has not been a day of peace in your lives. That it's the soundtrack in the background that's playing all the time. War, war, war. In 1970, there was a fantastic song that Edwin Starr came out with. It was called War. It ain't nothing, there ain't nothing good about it. It's no good. Actually, he's wrong. It's very good. Not for you, but for Lockheed Martin, for Northrop Grumman, for Boeing, for Raytheon, for United Technologies, for General Electric, for General Dynamics, and all the other components of the military-industrial complex in which this state is enormously benefiting. They're an enormous part of the military-industrial complex. That's a phrase, incidentally, that Dwight D. Eisenhower, a conservative Republican president, who, as he was leaving the White House on January 21st, 1961, warned the country that this military-industrial complex could really be a problem in the future. If Eisenhower were alive today, first of all, he'd have no place in the Republican Party and probably no place in the Democratic Party as well. He'd be considered too far out. That's how deeply ingrained militarism is in the political culture of our country. Why? Why do they hate us? Why 9/11? Why were 15 of the 19 hijackers from our dear beloved ally, Saudi Arabia? Why haven't the media probed these questions rather than give us stereotypical cliches about, well, Islam is like this, it's a violent religion? Violent religion? Do you know the history of Christianity? Just in the 20th century? If you want to talk violent religions, I mean, Islam looks pacific compared to Christianity and some other religions as well. Why do we ally ourselves with the most retrograde, feudalistic regime on the face of the earth? That is Saudi Arabia. Why do we cozy up to emirs and sheikhs who are thoroughly corrupt and are ripping off the peoples of their countries? Because it pays. Again, because it's money. Because it's the contracts that they buying the jets, buying the tanks, buying the submarines and the aircraft carriers and all the other things. Meanwhile, student debt is at $1.4 trillion. I don't know if any of you are in debt here. I mean, this is a smaller community college where the rip-off prices are not as much, let's say, as in the elite Ivy League schools, where on average it's $50,000, $60,000 a year. And that doesn't include all the fees. You've got to watch out for the fees that are added on, the way the banks add on fees for, pretty soon inhaling and exhaling, they're going to charge us for that. Using the bathroom, there'll be a fee for that. That's all, coming down the pipe. So investigative journalism takes time and money. And the corporations that control the media don't want to spend time. They don't want to spend money on investigating stories. That's why they'd rather focus on the latest Kardashian scandal or the latest celebrity divorce or the latest sports event, or etc. You get the point. There are endless titillating features about the lives of rich and famous Hollywood celebrities, sports stars, and don't forget the never-ending weather reports. 7, 8, 9 minutes of any newscast now is about the weather. And mind you, in 2016, I suspect some of you, maybe your parents, grandparents, voted for the current occupant of the Oral Office. 63 million Americans voted for the Great Prevaricator. That's not a marginal vote. I mean, that's really significant. The other candidate got, in fact, 3 million more votes, but because of this insane antediluvian Noah's Ark, Mount Ararat type of situation with the Electoral College, it's possible to win an election without winning a majority of votes. There's no other country on the face of the earth that has such a system where the person who does not get the most votes does not win. And that's another, issue. And again, 2 of the last 5 elections, including George W. Bush, the former great governor of this great state, defeated Al Gore while losing the popular vote. You'd think the Democrats would be interested in pursuing this issue of abolishing the Electoral College, but other than Elizabeth Warren, no one is talking about it. I think it's hugely anti-democratic, and we should have one person, one vote. The current system is so skewed that it's possible if I win, let's say, 10 states, right? I'm running against you for president, and I win New York, Texas, Florida, California, Michigan, Massachusetts, and New Jersey, and a couple of others, and you win, let's say, 10 million more votes than me. I win the election, even though 10 million more people voted for you, because I won those states that had the most electoral votes. Patently undemocratic. Anyway, let's go back to serious news is reduced to superficial, out of context reports. So for example, New York Times, I read it every day. It's got lots of terrific information. It's also the establishment organ. I mean, if you want to know what elites are thinking, read the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal. Listen to National Public Radio. Watch the NewsHour on PBS, the Petroleum Broadcasting Service. NPR is also known as National Propaganda Radio. It has 2 major news programs. One is Morning Edition, that is MOURNING, and the other is Some Things Considered. Because some of the things I'm talking about, they will not consider. They will not talk about U.S. militarism, U.S. foreign policy, which is aggressive and invades countries and tries to topple regimes it doesn't like. So this, in the New York Times, random thing. India accuses Pakistan in deadly Kashmir attack. Now, you may know that about 3 or 4 weeks ago, a column of Indian troops was attacked and about 40 soldiers were killed. There were, this is a terrible event. I mean, it's awful that these things happen. And so you read the reports, and nowhere do you learn that Kashmir is occupied by the Indian military, that they are under curfew, that their houses are demolished when there's collective punishment. If someone from a village does something the state doesn't like or attacks a soldier, the whole house gets blown up or the whole village gets cordoned off and curfewed. You have to have context. There's a reason these things happen. So when you explain something, it doesn't mean you're endorsing it. I don't endorse the attack of 9/11. It was scurrilous, it was outrageous. But I want to know why. And I don't just want to, fall for the line that W said, they just hate us. It's not just about that. It's directly connected to our foreign policy and the way the media indoctrinate and propagandize our population into believing we're surrounded by enemies. Now, the Great Prevaricator, just a couple of Fridays ago, made the announcement about a national emergency. Now, there is a national emergency in this country. It's about education. There's a national emergency around healthcare. There's a national emergency about the destruction of the environment. There are multiple national emergencies, not the one that is being fabricated and concocted, not very far from here, incidentally, where children are being separated from their parents. How Christian is that? How does that reflect so-called American values, which we want to export to the rest of the world? I read of a report of a 6-year-old Honduran boy who was separated from his parents for 9 months before the administration finally was able to hook him up with his parents. Imagine the trauma that kid went through. Imagine how distrustful he must be, how anxious he must be to be separated from his parents for such a long period of time. That is a scandal, and that, it's going on right under our noses. Context. Why are people leaving Honduras? Why are people leaving El Salvador and Guatemala? Have there been coups d'etats in those countries? Is there an enormous amount of violence? Is there, military control and police apparatus all over the place, putting enormous pressure on indigenous people, the Mayan particularly in Guatemala? All of these things contribute to people looking for safety, looking for security. Look, I'm the son of refugees, of immigrants who came to this country in 1921 from Beirut, survivors of the first genocide of the 20th century by the Turks against the Armenians in 1915. They came here with just the clothes on their back, with no money, because this was an opportunity. This was a place that was welcoming. The Emma Lazarus poem on the Statue of Liberty, "Give me your homeless and the wretched of the earth, we will welcome them here." I'm paraphrasing that particular poem. So people leave their homes under great duress. It's not an easy thing to pick up everything, abandon your land, abandon your culture, come to a country where you may not speak the language, where the political regime in Washington is openly hostile to you. That's not an easy thing for people to do. So it has to take something that is quite extreme and dangerous, that will make people pick up and walk, literally, all the way from Central America, to the border. We are enriched by diversity. We are enriched by people, who came to this country for a better life for themselves and for their families. We should be embracing them rather than scorning them, rather than instituting bans on people from this country or this religion. What has happened to human decency and compassion and kindness? I'm putting this out, in a rhetorical way. Let me just give you another example. I don't think I explained the Kashmir one sufficiently. What is the context? Kashmir has been occupied by the Indian military since 1947. It's the densest occupied zone in the world. I have been there multiple times. I am currently banned from India because of my reporting on Kashmir. Hundreds of thousands of Kashmiris have been tortured and wounded. 70 to 80,000 have been killed by this occupation. But if you read these articles, it's just crazy people doing crazy things. There's no context, so obviously you accept it at face value. We have to know the context. In the same way you read reports, which cannot make anyone happy, that, Palestinians, blow up a bus or kill a soldier or a policeman. Again, if you read the article, there's no mention of occupation, that they are under military occupation, that their land is being confiscated, that they're being subjected to collective punishment. Collective punishment, as I explained, if somebody from your neighborhood does something that the government doesn't like, the whole neighborhood suffers, goes under curfew, houses are blown up, etc. So take our so-called news, serious news. More and more foreign bureaus are closed. Reporters are parachuted in to give drive-by, breathless reports. Let me give you an example. Martha Raddatz. Do any of you watch ABC News? She's their what's called Chief Global Affairs Correspondent. When she reports from the Middle East, there's usually a mosque and a minaret in the background, and the inevitable Islamic call to prayer, the azan. The NPR does the same thing. It gives the piece some local flavor. And of course, her Arabic is flawless. What is it? Pita, hummus, falafel, tabbouleh, and jihad. Jihad, mispronounced all the time. Iraq, Arabs, Iran, Iranians, all of them mispronounced. They're getting hundreds of thousands of dollars and they can't take 30 seconds to learn to say Iraq or Iran. You don't have to know Arabic to say those words. It just takes some attention and respect for other people's culture. But when there is no respect, when there's dismissal, that's when they become Arabs and Islam and Muslims and all the other mispronunciations that permeate the media. And so why does this happen? I know we're going to have to wind up in just a moment. I just did a study of ABC World News Tonight. Do any of you watch this? It's one of the premier network news programs. The anchor is David Muir. He's very handsomely paid. He has the best hair on the air. He definitely distanced the other hair people because he's carefully coiffured at all times. This is World News Tonight, just on a random day. Any of you can do this. You don't have to be a journalism major to figure out what's going on. So world news, you'd expect, obviously, some world news, right? Global reporting. Let's see what the items were on March 1st, and you can do this any single night. First story, a weather storm in the Midwest. Clips of abandoned cars, motorists stuck in knee-deep snow, and piled up, drifts piling up above the car roof. That was the first story. Then pictures of trucks jackknife on the highway. No mention, of course, of climate disruption having any connection with yet another severe storm. Then we have the second item. Plane crashes into an 18-story building in Fort Lauderdale. Okay? Third story, Jared Kushner's security clearance. Fourth story, former patient attacked her therapist with a knife. The therapist called 911, and we hear that phone call. She's screaming into the microphone, "My patient's trying to kill me, stab me with a knife." Very dramatic, right? Mind you, this is world news, right? Keep going. The CEO of the San Francisco Giants, that's a baseball team, attacking his wife in public. And there was footage of that. Someone had taken with a cell phone that particular footage. That was followed by Amazon cargo plane crashes in Houston. Maybe some of you even remember that. That was about a month ago. Then we have a miracle in Florida. A teenager was trapped in her bedroom by a plane crash and escaped unscathed. Then there was a commercial for BP, the great polluter, British Petroleum. Then there's a manhunt on for a hit-and-run driver who severely injured a woman again in Florida. Then a chilling murder in New Jersey, body never found. And finally, the last item, which had me perplexed, saying goodbye to a TV legend, Katherine Helmond. Now, I confess I had no idea who this TV legend was. I had to look her up. Apparently, she was the star of a sitcom called Who's the Boss and Soap. So why do I, recite this litany of world news tonight? It shows you how inadequate the corporate media report global issues and how starved we are for kernels of information. And that's why there's so little understanding of what's going on out there, what's going on in Mexico, what's going on in Central America, what's going on in the Middle East, this very troubled corner of the earth, as the great leader has said. I'm going to close with a couple of poems, if I may. But before that, I want to tell you I've got these two new books out with Noam Chomsky and Edward Said. If you don't know who they are, you should. They're two of the greatest figures of the 20th and 21st century. Tremendous intellectuals of integrity and dedicated to social justice and to independence and for progressive change. So those are those two books. And then I've got 5 CDs, 1-hour alternative radio programs, Benjamin Hett, a professor at Hunter College in New York, about how Hitler happened. You don't think it can happen here? It can happen here. We can have fascism in this country if current trends continue and we are not alert to its dangers. If we just blow it off and say, oh, this is just a one-time thing and it'll just disappear. That's what they were saying about Hitler in 1929, in 1930. Oh, he'll just go away. He's a clown. No one takes him seriously. He's a perpetual liar. Does that sound familiar? You know, and he bullies his audience and insults people. No one will take him seriously. 3 years later, he's the chancellor of the most powerful country in Europe, a country that was at the apex of European civilization, that had art, music, Walter Gropius, architecture, Thomas Mann, Fritz Lang, cinema. Incredible civilization. Within a couple of years, descended into perhaps the most barbaric regime in human history. So that's about how Hitler happened. That's an interview I did in New York. A Canadian Iranian woman about what's happening to housing. Have you noticed in Houston that prices are really skyrocketing, and you know, the rent of one bedroom costs, I don't know, $1,500, $2,000. That's happening all over the country. Why is it happening? Because of speculation, because of hedge funds and equity funds that go in and buy up properties and then commodify them and exchange them, trade them on the international market, driving up share prices and driving up, of course, their profits. So how housing is financialized. Then Ilan Pappé on Palestine, a taboo topic like U.S. imperialism and U.S. militarism. And climate disruption, another program. Dar Jamail, a wonderful Lebanese-American scholar, activist, who just gave a talk about this issue. And then the great Edward Said on U.S. interventions in the Middle East. So all 5 of these 1-hour CDs here for you at Kingwood College for just $20. In Boulder, if you come to Boulder, there would be about $90 if you ordered them online at alternativeradio.org. So this is a bargain. I want you to pick them up and make copies, spread them around, give them to your friends. So I think it's important that we don't forget art and poetry and music, because quite frankly, it makes life worth living, you know, and having a garden and having flowers and being surrounded by, you know, people that you care about. And we cannot, and art plays a very important role, I think, in humanizing us, because we're dealing, I'm dealing with pretty serious heavy-duty stuff here, you know, and talking about possible planetary extinction. I mean, more species have been not just endangered, but have gone extinct in the last decade than in previous centuries combined. There is something seriously happening with the climate, and it's not going to change if we look away. If we're like good Germans were in the 1930s and 40s, oh, I didn't know what happened to that family. They just disappeared. Maybe they're traveling on vacation. You know, I saw that barbed wire and I saw the smoke coming out of the chimney, but you know, I thought they were just having a barbecue or a picnic. I didn't realize it was a death camp. Are we going to be like that, good Germans? Or are we going to be engaged and reverse this crisis? And even if we don't win, at least we have the dignity and self-respect of trying. At least we can look in the mirror at night and pass that test. Did I do something? Did I make an effort to try and change society in a positive way, to reverse global warming? I'm just going to close actually with a great African-American abolitionist. His name was Frederick Douglass. The Great Prevaricator, incidentally, thinks that Douglass is still alive during the last African-American month. You'll notice African-American History Month is the shortest month of the year. Another way blacks get shafted, you know, so they're not getting May or March that has 31 days. You get 28 days, right? Angela Davis makes this comment. And the Great Prevaricator said in Washington, Douglass is doing an amazing job. You know, people really like the work he's doing. Unfortunately, he died about 150 years ago, but that didn't seem to cloud, you know, self-styled genius, you know, and what he was thinking. This is what Frederick Douglass said in 1857. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom, yet deprecate agitation, are men and women who want crops without plowing the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the mighty roar of its waters. The struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one, or it may be both moral and physical. But it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. And that is the lesson of history, the lesson women learned in Seneca Falls, New York in 1848, when Elizabeth Cady Stanton took a handful of women and started the women's movement, when every single man in the country virtually was totally against what they were doing, when the political class was against what they were trying to do, telling them, you get pregnant, you take care of the children, you cook, you wash my clothes, you take care of the house. That is your place, woman. And these women, had they listened, we would still be in shackles. So it's about resistance, it's about struggle, it's about finding kindred spirits, and you can do it. People, on this campus can find groups to join in and into, Houston itself and the surrounding community. So thank you very much for your attention. Yeah, well, the question is about Kashmir. The gentleman said, it's a complicated issue. There are different ethnicities. There are different religions. The Kashmir Valley itself is overwhelmingly Muslim. Jammu, which is part of the state of Jammu and Kashmir, is majority Hindu, but there is a large Muslim population there. This is a legacy of British imperialism in 1947, when they did not demarcate the area carefully in their maps, and the Maharaja of the state of Kashmir happened to be a Hindu, and he came under enormous pressure from Nehru, who is the Prime Minister of India, to accede Kashmir to India, that it would be part of India. Now there was a problem with this. His population was overwhelmingly Muslim. They didn't want to be part of India. They wanted to be part of neighboring Pakistan. And that didn't happen. Nehru promised that there would be plebiscites and votes, and that the Kashmiris could vote in the future, once the law and order issue was settled, on their destiny, on whether they wanted to be in India or in Pakistan. The point I was trying to make was that if you just read this article, there's no context for what's going on. The place is occupied. I've been there. I'm now denied entry into India because of my reporting on Kashmir. There are checkpoints everywhere. There are soldiers completely covering the region. When you're in a car, if a military convoy comes by, you have to pull your car over to the side of the road and turn off your engine. Otherwise, you risk getting shot, as has happened on multiple occasions. There are things I learned in Kashmir which were mind-boggling. For example, the term half-widow. That is to say, thousands of Kashmiri men have gone missing, and their wives don't know what happened to them. There's never been any accounting from the state government, from the Indian rulers. And so they're half widows. They can't collect pensions. They're living in a kind of no person's land. Very, very awkward. It's very freighted with emotion. So, yes, issues are complicated, but notice how the way they use the word complication. They often use it, particularly pundits and experts in the corporate media. It's a way to get you to shut up. You can't understand what's going on in Israel and Palestine. It's very complicated. It's not that complicated. If you just apply yourself and learn, the basics of the issue, you can sort things out. You can see that there's an injustice here. You can see that people don't like to be occupied. If you were occupied, you wouldn't like it. If you were leaving this room and someone stopped you at the door, and started frisking you and then arresting you and taking you to prison and then torturing you, you wouldn't find that a pleasant experience. That's what happens under occupation. It's military rule. American exceptionalism is, the question is about American exceptionalism and what I might think of it. It has become a rampant speaking point of both Republicans and Democrats. It's a kind of bipartisan, celebration of U.S. Intervention and U.S. hegemony and domination of much of the world. It gives, I hesitate to call it a doctrine, because it doesn't rise to that level. It's a talking point, but it gives permission to the master to do whatever he wants with the servants. So if you're in, country Y and I don't like your policies, I, as the United States of America, embodied, in my 5'5" frame here, can do whatever I want to overthrow your regime. You have no such right, by the way. You cannot be dissatisfied with my government or my economy or what I'm doing here. That doesn't obtain to you. You have no rights whatsoever. So it has become an excuse for intervention. It has become an excuse for regime overthrow, regime change. What if someone in, take a random country, take Colombia, take Nicaragua, what if they said, we don't like the American government, we think there should be regime change in Washington, and we're going to do something about it. We're going to impose sanctions. We're going to go to the UN and try and get Security Council resolutions passed condemning your regime. I don't think that would get very far, because the US is the global hegemon. It has this enormous military and economic power. It's losing its moral power, incidentally, and nothing that is happening on the border, not far from here, is in any way detracting from that. So it's a very dangerous idea. And it has taken root because when it comes to intervention, when it comes to imperialism, that is getting involved in the affairs of other countries to their detriment, there's really not a lot of space between the Republicans and the Democrats. There's space in tactics, and you hear that in the discussion programs. That's why liberals love NPR, because first of all, people speak clear English and complete sentences. That's a great achievement in current discourse. If you listen to talk radio or watch any of the talk shows on TV, there's no yelling. People are very polite. Welcome to the program. Thank you very much. Wonderful to see you again. Great to be here. So there's this fake politesse that covers over, that masks an actually aggressive attitude. And so there's a discussion on, and this is mostly on NPR, and I listen to NPR all the time because I think it's a very significant, bellwether of what the ruling classes are thinking about and what they're concerned about. And so there'll be a discussion about, well, what should we do in Syria? Should we bomb them with B-2s or should we send in the Marines? So that's the discussion. Should we do this violent act or that violent act? Does anyone talk about international law, UN Security Council resolutions? No, that doesn't come up because those ideas are embedded in the discourse. The US, according to them, and under this false doctrine of exceptionalism, has the right to do anything it wants at any time in any country around the world. That's changing now as the US has become weaker economically. So its power is slowly eroding. So the question is about the immigration situation and the problem that it poses, and why aren't the political parties addressing this issue in some sensible plan. That pretty much paraphrases what this gentleman was asking. I think, first of all, you have to go to the source of why people are leaving their countries. What is the situation there? How do we contribute to that situation, and what can we do to alleviate it? Now, the Great Prevaricator, incidentally, just announced the suspension of all aid to Guatemala, to El Salvador, and to Honduras. Is that going to help the people there? In fact, it'll exacerbate their problem. There'll be more poverty, more violence as a result of the poverty. So I don't think that's a way to go. There's a lot of fear-mongering. The way that Hitler and the Nazis used the Jews and other minorities and gay people to scapegoat as blaming them for the problems, in the country. The present occupant of the White House is using this issue to divide us, to separate us. Oh, you're Hispanic. You must be for these. You must be a drug trafficker. You must be a human trafficker. You must be a rapist, a murderer. What kind of slandering comes out of the mouth of that man? I mean, it's absolutely astonishing. People should be revolting against the language used, smearing whole groups of people in such a way. I mean, I find it personally disgusting and revolting, among the many other things that are going on in Washington. So finding, an immigration policy that's fair, that's equitable, that's compassionate is what is needed. Again, people are leaving their homes because of dire circumstances, not because they're anxious, to walk 1,000 miles and be subjected to coyotes and rapists and people stealing their money. By the time they get to the border, they have nothing left. I mean, it's a critical situation that requires immediate attention, but most of all, compassion, caring for people who are in need. There's a song called "There But for Fortune Go You or I." That could be me at the border. I could have been born in Honduras, to peasant families, or I could have been born a Mayan indigenous in Guatemala and had been attacked by the military there in a genocidal campaign, which incidentally the U.S. supported throughout that particular period. So actions have consequences, and we have done many things contributing to this particular problem. So we have to look in the mirror ourselves. And we don't need to build walls, we need to build bridges between peoples. We need to build bridges between countries and different cultures, and we should be embracing the other rather than shunning them away. And I could just ask a very cynical kind of rhetorical question. Who will do the work that many of the Anglos don't want to do? Who will clean the toilets? Who will do the gardening? Who will do the landscaping? Who will do the construction? I mean, there was a film a few years ago, A Day Without Mexicans in Los Angeles. The whole city shuts down. There's no food, there's no traffic, there's nothing going on, there's nobody working. So immigrants contribute so much to the vitality of the country. Are there criminals among these people? Of course there are, like in any other group. But to demonize and stigmatize an entire group of people as just this or just that is totally unwarranted. And another example of the bullying in the bully pulpit. It's outrageous. And again, I'm saying that as someone who's the son of refugees and immigrants. Why is there no more good journalism? Well, I beg to differ. I think what I'm doing somehow would qualify as that. But there's some terrific journalists out there. For example, Liliana Segura. For example, Laura Poitras. For example, Glenn Greenwald. For example, Jeremy Scahill. For example, Matt Taibbi. The list can go on and on. So I get this question. Usually older people ask the question, excuse me, we're probably the same age. You're great. You don't look a day over 20, actually. So, they say, oh, Seymour Hersh is going to die. He's the great investigative journalist, legendary journalist. Or Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein are going to die. Who's going to take their place? There are lots of great journalists out there who are young. Many of them are women who are engaged in doing really good journalism. So I'm optimistic about the profession. There's always going to be interest in reporting and getting the facts out to people and exposing the vituperative kind of actions, both legal and illegal, that go on in our name. There's a very important point. Everyone signed the email sign-up sheet? Because as I said, I'm going to ask each and every one of you to write to Don at kpft.org and ask him to bring back alternative radio. By the way, this weekly 1-hour program I have is free of charge. So, they can't say, we don't have a budget or we have no money or something like that. It's totally free, and he knows it, and he'll respond to pressure from people like you. So please write to Don at kpft.org. Field reportage. Yeah, the comment is about Vice News and whether I watch it or not. I've heard good things about it, but I must say I also watch Deutsche Welle in English, France 24 also in English, CCTV, Chinese news from China. All of these things are available. The Guardian newspaper is worth reading. There are lots of great magazines and online and offline sources of information. The information is out there. you've got to dig a little bit for it. And you're not going to find it on the ABC News, World News Tonight, when it's mostly about airplane crashes and snowstorms and floods.